So some main themes, we talked about partnerships, and I think that's something, a common thread. We noticed that that's a common thread. I just was saying at the end with some of the other folks that sometimes these come like brokenly. I didn't quite say this particularly, but I was just about to add that because we oftentimes reach out to community people, but then we don't always follow up. I think sometimes it becomes like a one-off kind of situation that we don't really sustain that, which leads to the next point that we focus in a lot is sustainability. How do we not just create these partnerships and these links with the communities, but how do we keep those going and across all the different generations and all that? So we're oftentimes successful in that one quick relationship, but then it doesn't go anywhere. And I think that's we don't necessarily have a solution to that, but it's something that I think we have to we feel has to be explored more and more and not forgotten. There's one particular summer program where it's a very small group, so you're not reaching a lot of people in the short term, but it's a very focused effort. There's a lot of funding for that, a lot of outreach for that, a lot of very dense programming to reach that one group, and then hopefully things blossom from that. So you can't reach everybody. The point being that you can't reach everybody, but sometimes if you just make these small bursts of effort, they can blossom further out. If you're talking about the zoo, it's not just a place to go see animals, but it could be a place to have a picnic, and then from there build other relationships. Sometimes letting our users, or especially our potential users, guide what the experience becomes, and not just having this traditional idea of what our institution offers, but sometimes letting the other folks speak for what it could become, and that would be having more value.
The diversity of the community, that you can't make an assumption about one Spanish-speaking person in one country, and that there's a lot of cultural sensitivity per country versus just like being pumped into someone who speaks Spanish.
Can HOB partner with the Brooklyn Arts Council? We really love the idea of the artist ambassadors, and we thought maybe partnering with them, there's a lot of data they have, and we may have good access points there. Some ideas we have is maybe to create some type of information guide, both in advance and something that maybe they could get at the door, to utilize community leaders as ambassadors for our facilities to overcome there is sort of a perceived notion that, according to some information that Cool Culture has gathered, that there is, on one end of the spectrum, people view cultural institutions as kind of frivolous and not really necessary, and then there's others that view it as educational. And so it's kind of working to either bridge that gap or to provide the community leaders with experiences in our institutions so that they can come back and really speak on the value, but then we provide them a program that really meets their community needs so that it's a win-win for both.
We have older caregivers who are using our facilities with younger children, and so somehow we have to find a way to have programs that accommodate both the older populations and the younger people at the same time, so we don't lose either group when they're in our institutions. So one thing is like when these groups come into our institutions, maybe having language-friendly maps, which we talked about in the panel discussions. Someone brought up a great idea, maybe having footprints along the floors of our institutions, guiding people to like the restrooms and the cafes and certain things. Another suggestion that was really nice was having listening devices, electronic devices in their native languages, so they can, anyone comes in, they can feel more like, okay, we recognize their culture, we recognize their language. They come in and get a listening device that can guide them through our institutions in their own language.
Partnering is key with other groups, and I really like that one of the other groups talked about sustaining those partnerships, because I do think we've got a history of sort of one-offs, and then, that's gone, we forget, was it successful, we don't know. I do think that partnering and figuring out how to sustain those. We had an example, the Brighton Ballet group, they've got, I forgot how many students?
500 students.
500 kids. If we partnered with that group and somehow figured how to get those families to our institutions, wow, that's huge.
The differences between targeting certain communities versus targeting multiple communities through shared interests, whether that's offering small business classes for adults or digital media classes for kids, things that can appeal to people's interests, build real-world skills, and also bring them into our facilities. We talked about producing some kind of brochure in multiple languages that we could each give out at our own institutions that speaks to all of us. We also discussed inviting a diversity of perspectives into our institutions through things like visitor-generated or community-generated art, content, podcasts, those types of things.
Creating programming or events that meet the needs of the communities, not just trying to make them value, what we do the way we do it.
Yeah, and the challenge of not thinking in terms of one-off programs, but sustainable, renewable is a challenge. Who else? Summary thoughts? Yes.
I think being sensitive to, like you mentioned, about data, about the information, this is a very broad sweep, right? And these are very complicated, nuanced questions and communities, and like the diversity within those communities. So making sure that we drill down more deeply and just then pay attention to that next tier of speakers and communities that we didn't see today, and doing that through the ambassador structure and leadership in their communities.
Good. Marcus, do you have any summary thoughts?
So as a whole, from the working group and then also the larger commission at Brooklyn, that there are different capacities that each institution is able to fulfill, and that is, this type of conversation just makes it very complicated to really think about what kind of collaborative work would actually be realistic. So for the working group members to really think about the formal linguistic committee, that what happens in a park or a zoo is not the same as what happens in a library or an art museum or a children's museum. And sometimes you want to, we all have different capacities for what we can do.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
I would say a strong commitment to actually gaining their trust and interest.
Building trust over time.
Yes. A long commitment.
This is a long, I'm here, as I'm hearing this conversation, I'm thinking this is a long arc of work. This is not a shotgun effort.
Community groups and art institutions in order to be reached out to them, because I'm pretty sure you don't know what's going on in Chinese community, you don't know what's going on in Russian community, except few big and well-known groups. So I believe we have to use your community partners, who we are now, to help you in creating this kind of
So we need to be well advised by the communities. Yes.
And also you can find funding in the community. There are power people in communities, and they want to have their community welcome to the museum, to a zoo, to whatever venue we have. And they're willing to help us. They're willing to fund the program, because if they feel that their community is involved and is represented and will be getting something back, they're willing to fund it. This. So we have, in every community there are people with money, and they're looking forward to, show off their community and help us build this bridge.
That's great. That's great. Any last comments? All right. I thank you all so much. And as the working group takes all of your input to heart, I hope some of you will remain open to continuing this dialogue into the future. So thank you very much.